Richard Rouse.
My feeling at this point is if they're true fans, then they're not gonna give me a bunch of shit about like, why would you do this? Why can't you just keep making Chasing Amy? You can't keep making Chasing Amy. Dude, I'll never make Chasing Amy again. I'm sorry. Anybody that wants another Chasing Amy, they're never gonna see it because those circumstances will never exist again. I'm not that guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm happy. I got a really good life. Like, that's why I look at Zack and Miri when I was all done, and I was like, something's missing. And for me, it was a piece of sincerity, a piece of earnestness, a piece of absolute honesty. I'm fictionalizing at this point. I'm just writing fucking shit that I can't identify with anymore. I don't not pay my bills, you know what I'm saying? Like, if somebody pays my bills, I've got money, I'm married, I've got a kid, and here I am writing stories about, like, two kids who can't pay their bills, and they're like, let's fuck to get our bills paid. I'd never do that in a million years myself, you know what I'm saying? So for me, I was just like, I don't know, I'm getting further and further away from the source, because I'm getting older. You know, I'm fucking 39 now. When I wrote Clerks, I was fucking, 21, 22 years old? You can't expect me to write like that for the rest of my life. I'm getting older and smarter and wiser and learning new things. And same shit that interested me then does not interest me now. Chasing Amy is a fine film, but I look at it and go like, Holden McNeil is such a retard. Like, who thinks like this? Let's all have a three-way? What a dick. But that's because, like, that movie was therapy for me. But I can't, like, I've learned that lesson. I can't go back and fuck up and relearn that lesson. You know what I'm saying? Like, for me, I always drew from the personal life. But if I drew from the personal life right after Zack and Miri opened, and if I had written a script to be my next movie, it would have been about the poor fat kid whose movie didn't make as much money as he wanted it to. You know, and nobody wants to see that fucking movie. So, I don't know, for the cats who are just like, oh, I don't want to go with you to cop out, I'm like, all right, well, don't go. Maybe we'll see you on the next one. But if you're waiting around for Chasing Amy, it's never happening again. You know, there'll be something else. And God, look, Hit Somebody is going to be the best movie I ever make. Hands down. That's next. And people look at me like, the hockey movie? I'm like, you don't understand. This is the movie I was hardwired to make. And not because I love hockey, but because it's about something I understand. It's about a dude who loves something so much, and he's not good at it. But he gets to do it. I can fucking do that story. I live that story every day. You know what I'm saying? That movie's going to be the powerful one. But anybody waiting around for Chasing Amy, they got a long wait. It's not going to happen. It's done. I lived that life. I can't do it anymore. And not why I'm like, I disavow. That's all bullshit. I just can't live those experiences anymore, and it won't happen again. I'm married. Look, talk to my wife. Make her cheat on me. Make something happen in my life so that, like, I can draw from. But right now, I have nothing to draw from. No pain or anything like that until I start thinking about Hit Somebody. Until I locked myself in the library with all that weed and all those hockey videos and started really thinking about who the fuck I was. And suddenly I realized why that song meant so much to me, because I am that fucking guy. That was a hard thing to admit to, but I did it. Now I'm ready.
Hey, Captain Doc, working with your homeboy Bruce Willis, was there any anecdotes that you could share with us about that?
Yes.
Experience?
Working with Bruce Willis as an actor in Live Free or Die Hard was amazing. Working with Bruce Willis as his director in this movie was tough. It's so much better to be Bruce's friend as an actor than it is to be Bruce's director, because at that point you have two competing visions of what the movie can be. Bruce had a movie in his head, and Bruce is used to making the movie that's in his head. He always does. Unfortunately, I don't work that way. I had a movie in my head that I was hired to make too, so we had to find a way to make our two visions work sometimes. And it was never fucking belligerent. We never fought or anything like that, but he's an intimidating figure. Add to it the fact that I'm like, I will always defer to a senior, especially someone whose work I have enjoyed, especially somebody whose work I used to watch when I was sitting on my parents' couch when I was a child. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm directing David Addison, for Christ's sake. So when David Addison says he wants to do something, Kevin Smith is probably going to do it because he loves David Addison. Problem is, every once in a while, Kevin Smith, the director, is like, that's not the movie we're making. I don't know if I want to go in that direction. And then Kevin Smith, the filmmaker, had to figure out how to tell Bruce Willis, the movie star, no. And those cats aren't used to no. It's a world of yes when you're a movie star. And every once in a while, I had to be like, I see it kind of like this. And you get that slow Bruce Willis kind of turn. It's just like, oh, really, Kevin? It was good, though. We blended eventually. It took a couple days, though. And not like slugging at each other, but just like, I came from a world of comfort where, like, basically the world I came from was like a baby-proof house. You know when you have a baby and they go in and they fucking cover and there's no edges and you can't put your fingers in a socket? You cannot die in a baby-proof house if you're a baby unless somebody drops you off the second floor. My whole career has been that. I've been making films in a baby-proof house. This is the first time somebody brought me as a baby to somebody else's house with lots of sharp edges around it. And I was just like, ah! it is fraught with peril on a movie set with a movie star when there's, an alpha male. He was an alpha male, and he is and will always be an alpha male. So we had to find a way to kind of let the Wookiee win a lot. And still make the movie that we were going to make. And it worked out. I mean, it's weird. Most collaborative I've ever been is on this movie. And I think it benefited the movie the most. You know what I'm saying? But it benefited this movie. This movie would have benefited from collaboration. I don't think something like Chasing Amy or Clerks would have. That was so distinctive, so one voice. This, I'm starting with the script by two other guys to begin with. So, and the script was great, the script was funny, but then all of a sudden you add like two of the funniest fucking talents in movies. Dudes who are sharp like Rogen. Like, I love Rogen, I love Ben Affleck, Jason Lee, Jason Mewes to some degree, but Jason Mewes isn't sharp as an ad-libber. He's more just like a human pup. I stick my hand up his ass. And so he's fun to work with. But Tracy and Sean as well are my type of people, because you just sit there and make shit up with them all the time. On top of, like, it's just, you're one-upping each other. Like, they're trying to make you laugh, you're trying to make them laugh. And you're all servicing the audience, because ultimately you're trying to make them laugh. But you're two funny dudes who get each other's sense of humor, so you're like, say this. The opening scene in the movie, which I fought really hard to shoot this way. It's a scene in the movie where in the script is typical, interrogation room. Bruce and Tracy are on one side of the glass, dude's on the other side of the glass. And the scene called for, they need information from him. Tracy's going to go in there and pretend to not be a cop, but some crazy guy who's caught by the cops, and then get the information out of the dude. At one point, he has a line where he references Training Day. He uses a line. He says, "King Kong ain't got nothing on me." And I saw this line in the script. I'm like, okay, this is the scene. Like, this is the whole scene. The interrogation, everybody's seen the scene to death. That's just our framework. We've all seen that. And yes, getting Tracy to go in there and act crazy to get the information out of the guy, we've seen variations of that. Let's take it one step further. Here is a movie line. Let's make it that when he goes in there, he thinks he's acting. And Bruce doesn't think Tracy's an actor. So before they go into the room, they have an argument about acting. And Tracy's like maintaining that, like, because he's doing these movie lines, he's acting. Bruce maintains he's just stealing movie lines, and Tracy's like, it's called homage. And it goes. So suddenly the scene like deviates from like this typical sequence of it being on the other side of the interrogation wall. Then Tracy goes into it, and we start the scene with the cop dialogue. So I'm like, why are we doing one line? Let's do a couple lines of cop movie dialogue. So we're throwing lines from various cop movies that people will recognize. And then at this point, I'm just like, okay, why are we sticking to cop movies? Let's just have him bust movie lines, because at this point, once we've established that he busts cop lines, we'll pretend that he's run out of shit, and he'll just start grabbing other shit. And so I'm running into Tracy and be like, all right, man, do that line you always do from Planet of the Apes. Do that one next. And then I'm running out and shit, and then Tracy will be like, the Forbidden Zone was once a paradise. And the guy's like, what? And so between each line, we're running inside and going like, do this line. And people on the crew are like, oh, have him say, call me Mr. Tibbs. I was like, that's a good line. Run in, go say, call me Mr. Tibbs. And there was a dude, we're doing this for like 2 hours, and there's a crew dude who was standing kind of off to the side, man. I heard him talking to another crew guy. He goes, it's fucking amazing. It's like watching two children make a YouTube video with $30 million. But that, when you get players like that, it's just like, oh my God, it's so much fun. Let's do this. And the scene just gets ridiculous. Like at one point, it gets my favorite part of that scene, hands down, the comedic apex. And a lot of people feel it comes later, but for me, Tracy's sitting in the interrogation room, and it's a montage, so we're popping him in different corners of the room with this one guy who he's pretending to he's truly interrogating, but he's pretending he's crazy with. Tracy's sitting in a chair like that, with your legs go around the back of the chair the other way, leaning out with his elbows, and he's got a gun pointed at this dude. This dude's like this, and Tracy just goes, I love Harpo, but if he hits me again, I'll kill him dead. And Bruce goes, the color purple? I was just like, this is it. Like, this is fun. And that to me, I was like, right on. It wouldn't have happened on my movie. On my movie, I would have been running in there giving lines and shit, but I wouldn't have been hearing them. Like, I would have run in and said, like, do this. And they would have been like, what if I do this? I'd be like, hey, who's the writer here? And then walked off sullenly. But in this world where I wasn't the writer, I was just like, yeah, say that. And how about we say this? And what do you want to say? And meanwhile, the poor writer's off to the side going, why can't they just say what's on the page? But it was fun.
Richard Prowse.